All right, you guys, welcome. We're so glad that you're joining us for this evening's edition of History and Highballs. Tonight's program is History and Highballs, Highlands, North Carolina. My name is Stacy and I handle adult education here at the museum. So whenever you join us for one of these History and Highballs programs, you and I get to virtually spend the evening together listening to some incredible stories about North Carolina places and people and what makes our state so special. If you enjoyed tonight's program, we invite you to head over to the museum's website at www.ncmuseumofhistory.org, where you can learn more about our upcoming programs, exhibits, and digital resources. This is also where you can find more information about joining our North Carolina Museum of History Associates. Our associates and foundation provide crucial funding and support to the museum, which in addition to many other things, helps make programs like this evening's program possible. We would also like to thank those of you who donated funds towards this evening's program. We continue to do our best to keep our programs free to attend, but there are costs associated with keeping our series going. And we just want to thank you all so much for your continued generous support of the museum and its programs. A few quick housekeeping items for this evening. We ask that you please keep your mics muted throughout the entirety of the program, and to please type any questions that you have for our guest speakers into the chat function located at the bottom center of your screen. At the end of the program, our intern Bobby will ask our speakers as many of your questions as time allows. So we're going to switch things up a little bit this evening and start off our program by featuring an award-winning short video of the history of Highlands, North Carolina, written and narrated by the archivist of the Highlands Historical Society, Dr. Rand Shaffner. After that, we will have President of the Highlands Historical Society, Osborne Oakley, share various vignettes relating to the town's history. And finally, we will welcome our last speaker, Kaye McHan, Executive Director of the Highlands Chamber of Commerce, who will fill us in on what Highlands is up to these days and where it's headed to next. So first, let's watch this incredible film by Dr. Shaffner.
The village of Highlands was founded in 1875 by two developers living in Kansas who, according to legend, took a map in hand and drew a line from New York to New Orleans. Then they passed another line between Chicago and Savannah. These lines they predicted would be the great trade routes of the future, and where they crossed would someday be a great population center. What evolved was a health and summer resort at more than 4,000 feet on the highest crest of the western North Carolina plateau in the southern Appalachian Mountains. This paradisal settlement, the highest incorporated town east of the Rockies, provided common ground for both northern and southern pioneers a decade after their great Civil War. By 1883, nearly 300 immigrants from the eastern states were calling Highlands home. In the early 1880s, the town contained 8 country stores specializing in groceries, hardware, and general merchandise, a post office, a hotel and boarding house for summer guests, a public library, 4 churches, the Presbyterian, Episcopal, Baptist, and Methodist, and a first-class school. Very little changed in the town until the late 1920s, when the Calisaja River was dammed to form Lake Sequoia, providing hydroelectric power. The spectacularly scenic road from Highlands toward Franklin was carved into the rock walls of the Calisaja Gorge, and the muddy roads in and out of town were reinforced with crushed stone. By the time the Chamber of Commerce was established in 1931, the town's population had increased to 500, with 2,500 to 3,000 summer guests and 25 businesses. Again, very little changed from the 30s through the 60s. Highlands missed the Great Depression because most of its residents were accustomed to surviving hard times, growing their own meat and vegetables so that no one went hungry. Entertainment was homegrown, the most popular pastime being buck dancing, square dancing, and mountain clogging. For 50 years, Helen's Barn was the great equalizer, amalgamating winter and summer residents alike into a single class of foot-stomping revelers swinging to the twangs and whines of banjos and fiddles. Occasionally the circus climbed the mountain to Highlands, but always open were Anderson's 5 and 10 on 4th Street Hill and Bill's Soda Shop at 4th and Main, serving creamy milkshakes, sandwiches, cherry smashes, and ammonia cokes. The mid-1970s saw the sudden influx of multifamily homes and shopping centers that spawned land use plans and zoning laws intended to protect Highlands' natural assets. For the most part, the shops have remained individual. Chain stores have not yet robbed the village of its difference from the Xeroxed American town. The town's population today stands at 958 year-round residents with 15 to 20,000 summer guests and 387 businesses. Since its creation in 1875, the demographic mixture of Highlands has been remarkably unique. Founded by hardy pioneers from all over the nation, sober, industrious tradesmen from the north, Scotch-Irish laborers and craftsmen from the surrounding mountains and valleys, and wealthy aristocratic planters and professionals from the south, the town has served as a cultural center for well-known artists, musicians, actors, authors, photographers, scholars, and scientists who have thrived in its natural setting. The result is a town too cosmopolitan to be provincial, too broadly based to be singular in attitude and perspective, too enamored of its natural surroundings to be totally indifferent to them, and just isolated enough and small enough to be anxious about the benefits and setbacks of growth and development.
All right, so it is my honor to introduce this evening's first speaker, Osborne Oakley, who has served as president of the Highlands Historical Society for 6 years. He was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, but now calls Highlands home. He is a graduate of the Citadel, as well as Harvard Graduate School of Business. He has had multiple careers, including being a captain in the U.S. Army, spending 4 years as an armored engineer, and 5 years in special ops as a Green Beret. He is also retired from printing and publishing, having spent a successful career publishing multiple books. His interests include being an elder at First Presbyterian Church of Highlands, as well as mountain climbing, including having climbed Mount Orizaba, the 3rd tallest peak in North America, as well as Mount Rainier. He also enjoys wildlife photography and raising and showing camellias. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Obby. Welcome.
I want to thank Stacy so much for the opportunity to talk about a wonderful community of Highlands. I spoke to the Highlands Rotary Club on Tuesday, and the president was introducing me, and he introduced me as a speaker for the program. And I corrected him, and I said, I am really not, I don't consider myself a speaker, but I do really enjoy talking about things that are important to me, and certainly history and history of the town of Highlands is so important to me. So thank you for this opportunity, Stacy. So what I thought, and insofar as a program is concerned, you saw the wonderful video prepared by Rand Shaffner. Dr. Shaffner is the emeritus archivist for our museum, and he has put that together. So we saw that, and that gives you sort of a background and a flavor for where we are. And then I'd like to move into things that make Highlands unique. And I'm not talking about fancy shops. I'm not talking about lodging that you'd find promoted back in Condé Nast or that kind of thing. But I think it would be more interesting if we, as I say, did focus on the things that make Charlotte Highlands unique. Little stories, little vignettes, personal history. Some may be fudging a little bit on whether they're legend or the truth. But anyway, they do make good stories. And then I'll share with those in no particular order. And by the way, there won't be a lot of photographs. There'll be no photographs because some of these people we're talking about and so forth, they just don't exist. So I am going to be a storyteller. And there'll be no particular order in which I go through these. And then when I've had a chance to share those vignettes with you, then we're going to end up with Kaye McHan, and Stacy will tell you a little bit about Kaye. So I want to start off amplifying a little bit about what Rand told you about how the town got to be. There was a little township, I guess, here. It didn't have a name. It wasn't formalized. But these two guys out in Kansas drew these lines that we're talking about: Chicago, Savannah, New York, New Orleans. And there it was, Highlands. And so they were entrepreneurs, and they said, we are going to go in there, we're going to make this a destination. This is going to be a place where people are going to come. And so they promoted it. They had flyers that were going all over the place because Highlands didn't have a major river. It doesn't have any particular manufacturing. So it was the surroundings, the beauty, the height, elevation, that's what they were betting. They also said that it would become, it would have first-class schools. And we'll go back to that a little later, but they began to promote and folks started coming in. So this kind of was the nexus for how Highlands got started. There was a group I feel like now I want to talk a little bit about. Didn't play a major part, but when I first started looking around our museum a number of years ago, I realized that there was not one word about Native Americans, and yet they were all in and out of Highlands. No communities, there was no settlement there for the Cherokees. That was down in Franklin, which is about 20 miles away, but it was a place they came and hunted and fished. And so they had a presence for sure. And I think the sad thing, and we try to educate young people on a very sad and a very tragic part of American history, something a lot of places don't like to talk about, and that is the Trail of Tears, and how Andrew Jackson in around 1832 said he wanted all Indians and Native Americans rounded up and taken to, or made walk to, Oklahoma. And they really did. They rounded them up. Soldiers went around from community to community, and wherever they found a little clutch of Native Americans, Cherokees, they rounded them up. And the part of the mountains was dotted with little forts. And so if they had a number of people that they rounded up from around Highlands, they would escort them over to the forts until they got a number of people together. Then they would go to a major one until finally they marched them all out there. And the number of 17,000 sort of sticks in my mind. I may be short on that, but thousands died on the route. And that's a tragic part, how we could treat human beings, but yet we feel like young people ought to be aware of that. There's a couple of good bright sides to this also. One is that a lot of the local people sheltered them, hid them from the soldiers, protected them, and so they weren't rounded up and sent away. And that was a showing of compassion of our people. And the other side is that I don't know where they got the money, but little by little, the Cherokees came back and they acquired and purchased the land. It's what is now their reservation. It's not really a reservation because it's not owned by the government. They own it themselves. So that, I think, is just a feather in their cap as to how they did that. Okay, one of the iconic little stories about Highlands is what I call the Whiteside Mountain Rescue. And this was in about in the late 1890s, maybe early 1900s. It was a popular thing to do, to go from the town of Highlands up to this highest peak there. And you saw it in one of Rand's photographs. It's called Whiteside Mountain, magnificent peak and craggy cliffs and so forth. And so on the weekends, picnickers would get together, and there was a rough trail road up there, and they would get together and take picnics and go up and have a fun day and then come on back. And on this particular day, a group of young folks went up there. And some say maybe alcohol had something to do with this. And I think they were probably right. But one of the revelers, one of the guys that went up on this thing, a fellow named Gus Beatty, he was going to be smart, cute. You're going to impress the girls, so to speak. And so he acted like he was falling off the mountain. Well, guess what? He did. And he fell 60 feet down, was able to grab a rhododendron bush before plunging some thousands of feet down to the valley below. And he was doomed until one of the revelers, one of his buddies, a fellow named Charlie Wright, said, "Gus, hold on, buddy. I'm going to come after you. And whatever it takes, I'm going to get you." And so Charlie Wright made his way down this 60-foot angle drop, if you would, was able to get him, and little by little brought him up and to safety. And the town said, "Charlie, you're a hero." And someone got the idea, okay, let's put him in for the hero medal. The Carnegie Institute had a program for recognizing heroes. And so they put Charlie up for that. And the committee said, yeah, it's a good story, but it doesn't merit hero status. And the town said, well, wait a minute. You don't think so? Send a representative down here and let you and I, we'll walk up there and we'll see what Charlie did. And then you make your decision. So they did. They sent a representative down. They took him up there to that very spot, which is there today. You can go to it. And upon looking at it, the fellow to investigate this, he said, "Oh my gosh, you're right. This is true historic, heroic action." And so they gave and awarded Charlie the Gold Hero Medal. And along with it was a cash gift of $2,500. And that was big time money back then, I assure you. And that kind of played in on something that I hope I get a chance to talk about a little bit later, about Helen's Barn. Rand mentioned it in his movie. But anyway, the Whiteside Mountain Rescue and what old Charlie Wright did, saving Gus Beatty, is a story that's just told over and over and over again. And as I say, it's an iconic tale of Highlands lore, if you would. As I say, I'm just kind of bouncing around, but I want to talk a minute about Masa photographs. I don't know if you've heard of Masa before, but he was born in Japan, and he educated himself. He went to college there, made his way to the West Coast, and somehow or another got over on the East Coast and found himself in and around Asheville. And he got a job as sort of a busboy, luggage, kind of slucking things in and out. But he developed some kind of an idea, a talent for quote, developing film and having film processed. And so many of the tourists would take their pictures, and by that time he had changed his name from Gioraka Matsumuru to George Masa. He converted to Christianity, and he became a real popular guy. He would take these film and like get them developed, bring them back. And over time, he developed, I keep using that word, develop, he gained an interest in photography himself. And he acquired and bought a big camera, something like that, big tripods. And he then began to go out into the mountains, taking pictures of the local landscape. And they were dramatic. They were so impressive that the folks at the Grove Park Inn, if you're familiar with Asheville, you know how important Grove Park Inn is. And so the people there said, Mr. Masa, we want you to go out and take pictures of our countryside. It is so beautiful. We're going to use those to promote our inn. And we're going to bring in the tourists. And so they retained him to do that. And while he was doing that, he met and became friends with a preservationist, someone that really had a passion for preserving the wilderness and to save what was there. And this was turn of the century. And they became fast friends. And together they got this passion, this idea that the land should be saved. Now, we have, I'm going to digress a moment, we have the largest collection in existence of Masa photographs. We have close to 1,000. Unfortunately, there are no negatives. They were destroyed. I don't know how, what way, but what we have are original photographs. They may have Scotch tape across them, may have been creased, but they've all been digitized and cleaned up. And you can go today if you want on our research site, and if you see something you like, you can order that. But that we're very proud, and we have a room called the Masa Room that you can walk through. It's in our museum and see the genius of this man. And okay, I'm going to go back to his hooking up with this fellow Gephardt, Horace Gephardt, and the two of them were going to try to see what they could do. And somehow or another, they contacted and made an acquaintance with Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller Jr. And they convinced him, and through a number of visits and whatever, that this land was worth saving. And fast forward, it is the beginning of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Is that not a great story? Little Japanese immigrant that comes in, is able to use his skills in conjunction with someone and convince Rockefeller. And today, the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is the most visited park in all of the United States. What a legacy to leave. So we're very proud of our relationship and how Masa has played a part in our town of Highlands. Let's see where to go now. I want to talk a minute about Mary Lapham. Mary Lapham was a doctor, a medical doctor, and she had studied in Switzerland and had become a proponent of a way of curing tuberculosis. And this, again, turn of the century time, 1900, tuberculosis was practically, there were no antibiotics, there was nothing. It was a disease of the lung. And she had this protocol, this system of treatment that she had learned in Switzerland. And what it involved is that a needle was inserted into a lung, and all of the bad air was pulled out of that lung. And in its place, they put nitrogen. And over time, the body would replace the nitrogen with itself. And by coming to Highlands, where the air was pure, that was cool. There was a perfect place to have this happen naturally. And so Dr. Lapham, by the way, when they do one side and get it, well, they'd go over and take that bad air out of the other side, and hopefully the patient would be cured. And during those stays, Dr. Lapham built a sanatorium. And up on a hill, she had 65 little tent cottages, they call, single room, if you call it a room, set up on blocks, rocks, maybe a stove in there. There were no windows. There were curtains that they could drop, which would keep rain and the bugs out, perhaps. But it was an endurance test to try to live through the winter with that under those conditions. And yet she had many people came in and were cured. It's one of the local terms for Dr. Lapham's 65 little cabins up there. It was on the hill. It's called Bug Hill, and to this day it's called Bug Hill. Not very endearing, but Dr. Lapham, what she did, had its impact on our community also. Just think of the number of people that came from all over to be cured of this terrible disease of tuberculosis. And after very successful with that, she later joined the Army, and she became a member of the Armed Forces in World War I. What an amazing lady she was, and what she did contribute to our community is truly successful. Talking about individuals, every town perhaps has one, but the name of Samuel Prelude Ravenel sticks in the mind of anybody that's familiar with Highlands history. Ravenel was a plantation owner from around Charleston. He had a big plantation called One Toot, and he had fought in the Civil War. Legend has it that he was a part of the force that attacked Fort Sumter. We've got his saber in the museum, but S.R. Ravenel, S.P. Ravenel, was also an engineer. He had ideas of a railroad that would go from Charleston up to Cleveland. And one of the things that they would have to do is a large tunnel down close by, maybe 30 miles from Highlands. And so during his free time, and when he had it, he would ride his horse around and just love the landscape, love the views, cool weather. And he fell in love with Highlands. And he decided, you know what, I want to build a house up there. I want my family to be able to go there in the hot, humid summertime and enjoy everything that Highlands had to offer. And several things. Number one, he's credited for the second home in the region. He built this house, called it One Toot after his plantation, and he and his family would spend a lot of time here, ultimately most of their time. They were very, very benevolent also, as so many people of that genre, of that age and so were. And over time, he acquired a tremendous amount of property. I think the figure is 35,000 acres sticks in my mind that would go from his place, One Toot, which is right outside of Highlands, all the way up to that mountain I mentioned earlier, Whiteside. And that was over time, he bequeathed a lot of that back to the town. There's a lake that he built and was given back. one of the most beautiful views in all of Highlands. In fact, one of the iconic views of the town is taken from Sunset Rock. And he owned that, and ultimately he and his family gave that to the town. And so Ravenel was a benevolent person. Now, if the name sounds familiar and you've ever been to Charleston recently, that magnificent bridge that spans the Cooper River is the Ravenel Bridge. And yes, it is a part of the Ravenel family of which he was a part. So it made its mark on, they made their mark on the town. His wife, Margaretta, she and her sister donated the land and the money to build the first Presbyterian church of Highlands. And they ultimately opened lodging. So it would be remiss if I didn't tell a little bit about Ravenel and the impact that he made, and how his name is, associated with, certainly with the town. I mentioned schools, and when they were promoting, Kelsey and Hutchison promoting Highlands, they were saying all of these wonderful things that were going to happen up here. And I guess Kaye, you're going to hear from Kaye, who is the director of the Highlands Chamber of Commerce, but boy, they were really doing a good job on promoting Highlands, Kaye. And one of the things that they said what they're going to do was going to have first-class schools. And come back to that in a minute, but when the school system started, it was hardly a system, but it was about 7 little schools in the outlying communities, one-room schools, one teacher taught the whole thing. And it then became, I guess, with the electricity, and it became obvious that it really needed to have a unified school system. It was hard to get through, because some of these kids would have to walk miles and miles, and some of them would actually try to board with somebody to be able to go to school in Highlands and take advantage of that. And when we were doing our refurbishing of the museum recently, some of the students who were helping on this came back, and that's what they had, first-class schools. And at the time I thought, that sounds elitist. I don't know whether we want to, say that or not, but that was what was promoted. That's what they wanted. And Mr. Harbison, who was responsible for all of the consolidation of the schools, he used that as his mantra. And today, Highlands School is unique. There are probably 3 other schools in the state like it. It goes from K through 12, all in one school. And it's a remarkable in what they do. You're in North Carolina, you're familiar with the scholarships. Names escapes me right now, but the they had 2 Morehead scholars. They had 2 Morehead scholars that come out of that, and just from that one little school, this gives you some idea of the quality of the education. So schools in Highlands are absolutely a part of, and an important part of, who we are. Okay, I'll talk briefly about Helen's barn. Charlie Wright, he got this $2,500, and he bought this big chunk of property in what is now on a major corner of the town. And over time, they had various shops and things there. Unfortunately, Charlie died in an automobile accident about 16 years after he won that award. And his wife, Helen, was left with that property and what to do with it. And somehow or another, she came up with the idea of having a like a barn or a place to gather and just have fun. And if you remember Rand's video, he showed people out there dancing and strumming, and it became a focal point. And for almost 50 years, it became Helen's Barn. Everybody knew about Helen's Barn that was in the area. And it was a great amalgamator. It brought tourists from Atlanta and Florida and whatever together with the local people, and they blended well. And it just was a great equalizer. And gosh, it was a place to go and clog and buck dance. And as Rand said in his video, yeehaw, over there, and having that kind of fun. So that, again, that award that Charlie got had a direct impact on the social life and a lot of things that went on in Highland. There is a little shopping area today that's called Wright Square, and it was named for him. But Helen's Barn played an important part. Like I said, Rand said almost 50 years that it did that. Okay, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the impact of an individual and his game had then and has to this day been a tremendous impact on the town of Highlands. And if I would ask how many of you have ever heard of Bobby Jones, there'd be a lot of you that have. Now, depending on the generation, Bobby Jones was a golfer, amateur golfer who won in 1 year the British Amateur, the British Open, US Amateur, and the US Open, all in the same year as an amateur. It's never been done before, never be done again. And he was, without a doubt, the most famous athlete in all the world. Everybody knew Bobby Jones. His dad, Big Bob Jones, took a liking to Highlands early on because he could come up here and enjoy the weather. And he and a group of his friends from Atlanta decided they're going to build a golf course, and they were going to build a country club and a place where they could come and socialize. And so the Highlands, they formed the Highlands Country Club, and that was in 1930. And from that club, a number of others were spawned. Highlands Falls, Calisaja, Wildcat Cliffs, all four of those golf courses came about as a result of the Highlands Country Club. And we recognize those today in an exhibit at the museum. But what Bobby Jones did and the game of golf was more than just him being the most famous athlete in the world. He was a very shy person, and they wanted him to have a house right down on the lake, and he wouldn't do it. He went on up a little further there on the club property. But with these other country clubs being formed, that required maintenance people. They had to have people who would cut the grass. They had to have people who would serve at the club. They had to have all of this support people. Well, what do you have when you got all of these workers, maintenance, support people? What do you need? Well, you need banks, you need schools, you need churches, you name it. So that whole infrastructure had to be created, and that had a profound impact on the direction Highlands would take. The second homes. That became that was one of the first things that spun off from that. People coming up from Florida. Today, Birmingham is a big draw into Highlands. Texas is a big draw. And so you can truthfully say that the impact that Bobby Jones and the game of golf had on Highlands was without a doubt impactful. I'll mention one thing about the exhibit that we have in the museum. As I say, we have a huge image of Bobby Jones, a little timeline of what he did when he did it. And on this side, we have pictures of those 4 country clubs. Over on this side, we've got a glassed-in panel, and we have a set of golf clubs that was owned by Bobby Jones. And it's one of the few in the world. We can't say that Bobby Jones played with those, but we do know and can establish the provenance that he owned them. And then he, at a point in time, gave them to his favorite caddy, which was Coleman Reese. Coleman played with them, but at a point in time, when he died, his wife then said, these belong in the museum, and she bequeathed them to the Highlands Historical Society, which we have. And it's one of the more popular exhibits that we have in the museum. All right, kind of maybe I'm saving some of the best for the last. One of my favorite stories in all of Highlands is the Moccasin War. And if I were to ask you, how many of you have heard of the Moccasin War? Now, I doubt many of you did. At the Rotary meeting the other day, I asked that same question. And yeah, there was a sprinkling of people that knew about that. It's expected because they're right there in Highlands. But the Moccasin War came about in 1885. Town had been in existence for about 10 years. And Moccasin is a little town in the community. It doesn't exist anymore. A little town and community down in Georgia. And those old boys down there, they felt it was their God-given right and privilege to run all the moonshine and the many batches that they wanted to and sell it where the hell ever they wanted to. And one of their big markets was right up here in Highlands. And the folks in Highlands didn't take kindly to that. As Rand mentioned again in his video, this was a sober, God-fearing community. And here these boys were coming up here selling their hooch or Devil's Brew or White Lightning or whatever you want to call it. And there was someone else, another group that didn't take kindly to that. And that was the United States Revenue Department, because these guys were selling untaxed liquor. And on one of the trips up here, in a raid, the revenuers caught one of the moonshiners and imprisoned him in one of the hotels, beautiful Highlands Inn hotel. And again, you saw a number of pictures there in the video that Rand had, but they didn't have a jail. And so in order to hold him until marshals came and carried him away or whatever, they locked him up over there in the Highlands Inn and they put him under guard. The boys down in Georgia did not take kindly to that. They formed a posse. They said, we're going to go get the boy and we're going to bring him back here to Moccasin where he belongs and teach those guys a lesson. Well, the mayor at the time in Highlands was Bascom, Mayor Bascom, and there's his imprints also in our town today. And he organized and put out a call for a welcoming committee that would be like, he's not going to get him. And so what happened is that the Highlanders and their welcoming committee, they established and ensconced themselves in the Highlands Inn. The boys and the posse from down at Moccasin came up, and there's a hotel across the street. At the time, it was Central House. Today, it's the old Edwards Inn. And they began for about 3 days sniping at each other. And there was a war going on. And today, that's part of Main Street. It was like shootout on the OK Corral kind of thing. And unfortunately, one of the Moccasin boys from down there, was shot and killed. And that sort of brought a halt to the sniping. They wanted to take their friend back to Moccasin, give him a proper burial, which they did. And but as you'd expect, they didn't let it go with that. They said, you're going to pay. And they didn't want to get into all of the shooting war again. So what they did is established a roadblock. They were going to blockade anything in and out of town. There's only one road into town, and that was what's now the Walhalla Road. And so they set up a blockade, and nothing came and nothing went because of that blockade. And over time, the larders were getting empty, the pantries were empty, folks were getting, it was a pretty dire straits, really. And they didn't know what to do, but there's a Civil War veteran, old Confederate veteran, named Joel Lapham. And here's where legend starts coming in, and you don't know how much this little story is true, but it does say that Lapham said, I'll run the blockade. And so he had his buckboard wagon. They say he put a big Winchester rifle across his lap, and he started down the road, and eyes straight ahead. And he got to a bend in the road, and there they were, the Beasley brothers. They do know that. And they had set up the blockade, and they were manning it and staffing it at that time. And here again, legend says that old Joel Lapham, he said, Lord, if there is a Lord, I want you to help me get through this. And if you're not going to help me, please don't help those Beasley boys. And he went right on through. They opened up, let him go through, and that's how the blockade was broken. Now, I will say this, because documented that this story appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle, the New York Times, the Charlotte Observer, and I think in the Atlanta paper. So the Moccasin War, famous Moccasin War, goes down in history as an iconic event in the town of Highlands. I'm going to wrap it up right now with a short little story about the number of people in this little town who have answered the call to serve in the military, who have been veterans. And it goes back to the Revolutionary War. We have documented who did that. The Civil War, First World War, Spanish American, all the way up. And to honor those people, one of our most popular exhibits is a military uniform exhibit. And these uniforms representing all the branches of service, whether we have 15 different uniforms of different conflicts and whatever. And they are not just any kind of uniform. They are uniforms that were worn by people with Highlands connections. And we've got a picture of that person in that uniform, along with a little description of what they did during this. It's as I say, one of the most popular exhibits we had. Over on this side, there's a little sidebar to that. We've got a Confederate flag and a US flag. The story is, and it's documented, and this is true, that, not all Highlands or all Southerners supported the Confederacy. And there were a large number who actually went and fought for the Union. And there were folks like that in Highlands. And so after the war, people came back, and I guess it was, I guess life is normal. Well, one of the people that came back, persons, was a doctor named Armstrong, who was fought for the Union. The other one was a descendant or one of the earlier relatives of the Lowe family in Highlands now. And so, as fate would have it, he had a daughter, he had a son, and they married. And that began a family tree that came right down to this day. And I don't know how many generations, great, whatever. But on our board today, we have a descendant of those two gentlemen. And I think that is another little personal history of Highlands. It makes it kind of unique. I'm going to end it there. I do want to thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to share tonight with you. What a great idea this is. I'm going to go online and see how many other programs are going to have coming down and avail myself of that. But Stacy, can I turn it back over to you now?
Yes, you absolutely can. Thank you so much, Abby. That was wonderful to experience Highlands through you this evening. What a special thing for us. Thank you. So now we are going to hear from Kaye McHan. Is that right, Kaye? Hopefully it is. Executive Director of Highlands Chamber of Commerce and Visit Highlands NC. Kaye has a long background in education and various nonprofits. So she's passionate about all things Highlands and is so thrilled to be a part of both the Chamber and Visit Highlands NC. So Kaye, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Stacy. I really appreciate it. And Abby, what great stories. We sure have a lot of them in Highlands, and of course, storytelling is a wonderful Southern tradition. So I was going, Abby asked me to kind of bring you forward and talk more about today. So a great way that you can actually still experience Highlands history is through our nonprofits. We have 67 nonprofits that are located in Highlands. And due to our natural beauty that we have here, that welcoming hospitality, artists and writers and intellectuals and philosophers have been coming here for, well, ever since the town began in 1875. And they come to escape and they relax and they study and they create. And having all these people come to Highlands, you know, has started many of our nonprofits. One of our oldest nonprofits is our Hudson Library. And today the Hudson Library is actually listed in the American Library Directory as one of the oldest libraries in North Carolina. And it began in 1884 in a corner cupboard that was full of donated books from a local lady. And by 1895, they had actually incorporated as the library, and they were paying their librarian $10 a year. And by 1915, they had outgrown their space, which was in the school, and they had moved out to a new home on Main Street, which you can actually see that building at our historic village. And then by 1985, they again needed to move, and they are in their current location still on Main Street. Hudson Library has great programs today, all ages, and is a wonderful service to our community. You know, Abby told you a little bit about the history and mentioned a few things about the Historical Society, and they have a great village, a historical village that has been set up. And the Highlands Historical Preservation Society was actually set up in 1979 and it had a period of inactivity, and so they reactivated it in 1999 and became the Highlands Historical Society. At the village, if you come to visit, you'll see the oldest existing house that was constructed after the founding of Highlands. And the home was built in 1877, and it's listed on the National Historic Register as the Elizabeth Wright Prince House. You'll also see a sample of the Bug Hill Cottage that Obi was telling you about, that Dr. Lapham used to help treat TB on Bug Hill. It was a part of her sanatorium. They also have on the Historic Village, they have the Town Clock Schoolhouse, which became the Hudson Library. It now serves as the museum and the archive area. And that's where Abby was telling you about all the different things that you can see in there and how they've developed that. And it's terrific. And you can also do the Heritage Trail, which actually goes all over town. So if you want to get your steps in, come by the Welcome Center and we'll give you one of the trail maps, and you can go all over town and see landmarks and historic buildings. In fact, the Welcome Center is actually in one of our historic homes that was built in 1879. You can see it in the background here. Another nonprofit that Abby was referring to was our Highlands Land Trust. And the Highlands Land Trust is the oldest land trust in North Carolina, and it's among the first 20 land trusts that were actually established in the US. The land trust originated in 1883, and their beginning projects that they did were things like building trails, and they were doing tree planting projects. But by 1909, they had already purchased 56 acres on Satula Mountain. And then shortly after that, about 1914, they purchased 10 acres that was overlooking the town. And that's what Abby was talking about, was the Sunset Rock, which is the most amazing view of town and incredible sunsets. I mean, just some of the best. Today, it's still one of our favorite hiking paths that people will walk up to Sunset Rock, take a bottle of wine with you and a flashlight, and stay for the sunset and enjoy it. And it might be dark by the time you get back down, so that's what the flashlight's for. Today, the Land Trust actually protects over 3,400 acres of forest and wetlands and vistas. And they do that because we are home to rare and endemic plants and animals. We also are the headwaters of 6 different watersheds. Many of these areas are public areas that you can visit. So a great thing to do when you come to Highlands. Another one of our old nonprofits that are in town is the Highlands Biological Station and Nature Center. They were first known as the Highlands Museum and Biological Laboratory, and they were actually founded in 1927. And the founders, when you read about it, what they wanted to do was to preserve the intellectual spirit of Highlands, which goes back to all those people that I was talking about, love to come here and study and spend their time. So as the Natural History Museum that they had developed grew, they realized that they needed an experimental station or a biological laboratory, and that was built. And then by 1930, the first scientific document had actually been published through the laboratory, and there's a long history of studies and things that have been published from there, and they have a great website where you can see all of that. And today they're still conducting research. It's all the things that they're doing. I looked up so I could tell you more specifically about what they do, but their research, it's as diverse as our Southern Mountain region. So go, like I said, go to their website and take a look. They also built a nature center, which is really a lot of fun to go and visit. The building for the Nature Center was actually constructed primarily by the WPA. and was completed in 1941. And then in 1962, they actually built the Botanical Gardens, which is one of my favorite places to go and walk through. And it's comprised of all types of unique native plants, lots of different signage and things that you can see there. And I love walking back in there, and there's this beautiful little lake that's back in there. And we actually have river otters that have come back. They were here years ago and now they have returned. So we're really excited about seeing those there. Their campus now has 24 acres. It has 4 residencies, you know, the fully equipped research and teaching labs and classrooms, the nature center, the botanical garden. So I encourage you to participate in some of their public programming. They have great kids programs as well as things for adults, and all the academic programming is still going on as well. Another organization that has been around for a long time is our Highlands Playhouse. So many creative people have come to visit and be inspired. And so the Playhouse is actually one of the country's oldest professional summer stock theater troupes. And that first troupe actually began in the 1930s. Group of amateurs, and they were doing their performances in the school auditorium. But in their first big production, they sold the tickets for 50 cents a piece. And if you were willing to sit on the bleachers in the auditorium, then you only had to pay 35 cents. So quite a bargain. Soon they began bringing in professionals though. And so they brought in professional actors and authors and expanded the program. And today we still have professional summer productions that are going on, and they do movies, and they have a wonderful program for children that are interested in the theater, and they can begin learning. Our Highlands Chamber music also dates back and is a fabulous addition to the town. And that began in 1974. They held 3 concerts, and they held it at the beautiful Episcopal Church here, which if you come to visit, you have to see our churches, just incredible buildings. And they are on that heritage trail. You can have some more information there. So they started off in 1974 with just the 3 concerts that summer. And by 1982, the festival held its first season with 4 weeks of chamber music. And then by 1999, they had purchased a church building on Chestnut Street, and that became their permanent home. And they actually gifted the town to the building to the town of Highlands, and it has become our performing arts center. And they renovated the building and they opened it in 2001, and the Chamber Music Festival is still going on today, and they are among one of the oldest and longest running summer chamber music festivals in the US. Incredible musicians from all over the world that they bring in. So the Performing Arts Center that was gifted to the town has now become our venue for community performing arts. So you'll find, of course, the Chamber Music Festival there. There's also the Highlands Community Players. We have a bel canto opera series that happens every year. And the Performing Arts Center itself puts on wonderful programs. They have live concerts. They do live satellite series of the Metropolitan Opera, the National Theater Live, and the Bolshoi Ballet. And we're really excited about what's happening at the Performing Arts Center now, because in 22, they're going to be opening up their newly expanded campus for more programming to happen there. So we're really excited about having that come to town. The Bascom Center for the Arts, Abby talked about Mayor Bascom a little bit, and that's a name. He has a really interesting history here in Highlands. So the Bascom Center for Visual Arts actually was originally called the Bascom Louise Gallery. And it was housed in that library building that opened in 1985. And the gallery and the library were actually made possible through the son-in-law and daughter of Mayor Bascom. And his son-in-law and daughter's estate was actually left, the home Chatula, and the funds from the sale of that went to build the library building, and they were passionate about the visual arts and supporting regional artists. So they stipulated that there would be a gallery within the library. So that's where it all began. And that gallery has now grown into our Bascom Center for Visual Arts, which is located here in town on the Crane Farm property. It is a beautiful 6-acre park-like setting. They have an 87-foot covered bridge that's from the mid-1800s. They have a historic timber frame barn, also from the mid-1800s, that has been created into a 28,000 square foot main building and houses all the exhibitions and workshop spaces and a wonderful store there where you can buy local artist works and regional artist works. There is also a replica of the original Crane stable on that property, and it's a wonderful ceramic studio. You can go to the Bascom and you can take drawing classes, painting classes, ceramic classes. You can see the exhibits. There's lots to do there. There's great trails there. There's sculptures along the trails and along the property. And the trail there actually connects to our Greenway Trail here in town, which is a wonderful way to get out in nature and great way to walk around town and go from place to place. The Chamber of Commerce, yeah, I have to brag on us. We've been around for 90 years. Avi actually mentioned that previously, that we were actually founded in 1931. So we're celebrating our 90th birthday this year and really excited about that. He also mentioned some of our accommodations here in town. He mentioned the Highlands Inn and the Old Edwards Inn, and there were actually images of that in Rand Shaffner's video that you saw. You can still stay in those accommodations. The Old Edwards Inn and Spa is gorgeous. The Highlands Inn is still right there on Main Street. And you can imagine the Moccasin War going on between those two buildings right across Main Street. We also have many retail businesses that have been here for a long time. Wits Inn being our very oldest, which was actually has been in operation since 1940. And there's many others along Main Street that you'll find that. One of the great things about our Main Street is that we don't have a mall. We don't have box stores. We also don't have fast food. So if you're into McDonald's, you're not going to find that. I noticed in the questions coming through, somebody asked about Highlands and Highballs. Well, I can tell you that we have 6 Wine Spectator restaurants here in town, and we have some great mixologists. So if you want something in a highball glass, come to Highlands. They will certainly take care of that. I was asking Stacy when we started tonight who was serving the highballs. But if you want one, we can take care of it. You know, today, I can't say enough good things about it. And I swear it's not just because of my job. I really do love this town. You know, our mountains here where we live actually began their formation 300 to 400 million years ago. So that will tell you about how old our land is. As Avi shared, you know, that the Cherokees were here. They wintered their horses in Horse Cove. They have such an important part of our history here. The early pioneers that came in, I mean, those had to be some strong people to come in and, you know, make their life here on the mountain. Our founding fathers and mothers worked very hard to promote and to build the community. They were farmers, they were stock raisers. They came and they welcomed people who came in that were health seekers, that were interested in the arts, and people who love nature and love the environment. Tourism is still our primary industry here, and it's been supporting our town since the very beginning. There's some interesting information at the Historical Society about some of the first pamphlets that were actually made about Highlands, and George Masa, who Abby was referring to, did photography for real estate around here, and you can even see that. And a lot of his images were used in those early promotions. Today, we're really working hard, and we're striving to really protect and preserve this mountain town. What we love about it is that it is still our small mountain town. We still know our neighbors. We still take care of each other. We still love welcoming people here and showing some good Southern hospitality. We are enamored by the environment that we live in. We are literally surrounded by the Nantahala forest. The arts are a huge part of our life here, and just protecting small towns. So what else can I tell you? I know you guys are going to do some questions. Stacy, you want to take it from here and see if we have any questions?
Thank you, Kaye. That was wonderful. I don't know about everybody else, but all it did was make me want to come to the Highlands more than I already did. A lot. So our adult programs intern, Bobby, is going to comb through the chat and ask you guys the questions that our attendees had. So Bobby, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, hello. So we'll start with the questions in order. Are there any books or essays written about the people of the Highlands who hid the Cherokee people as they were being gathered for the Trail of Tears March?
Say that again, Bobby.
Are there any books or essays written about the people of the Highlands who hid the Cherokee people as they were being gathered for the Trail of Tears March? I guess this would be a question for you, Obi.
We have one book on the Cherokees. We have a pretty nice bookstore, by the way, and you can go online and get those. But yes, Anna Ferriello did a comprehensive study, and there is a book on the Cherokees there at the museum, and I think it's about $15.
And what was the title of that book?
And just, you'll see it if you go on. You'll see it. It does have Cherokee in the title, and I can't peel it off right now.
All right. Next question is, what should my friends know if they're thinking about moving to the Highlands? I guess, you know, we've talked a lot about what living there is like, but is there any specific things that someone who's moving from California, I believe they said?
Well, one of the things I always like to tell people when they give us a call or they start asking a lot of those questions is something I've already mentioned. We don't have fast food, but we do have great restaurants. And there aren't box stores here. Highlands is a destination within itself. You're going to drive up to, 4,118 feet on top of the mountain. And it's a beautiful plateau here. But it's, you're not going to run out to your local favorite, Target or, wherever you like to shop. We can drive up to Asheville, it's about an hour and a half. We can drive down toward Atlanta or Greenville, and a great place to get to other cities. But I think it is a lifestyle choice. It is a small town, but that's why we move here. If you're an outdoor enthusiast, you'll definitely love it here. There's incredible waterfalls, trails that you can hike on, lots of activities that you can do outside.
All right, our next question is, Highlands has some great names for roads and neighborhoods. Can you talk about where some of the more interesting names come from? I don't know, maybe if you just want to pick one or two examples.
What was that question again, Bobby?
Highlands and its unique names for roads and neighborhoods. Could you talk a little bit about where those come from?
Well, I know that there are some that come from the Cherokees. We have Calisaja Drive, we have Satula, we have some of the things are still native Cherokee names. But insofar as true neighborhoods, Kaye, you say you can back me up on this, but it's not as we think of clustered neighborhoods, but they're that's about all I know insofar as where they came from. A lot of them are named for the families that are up there. The Potts Road, McNair, Bryson, all these are named for a lot of the old timers that are there.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff. You know, if you're a fan of books, who was asking about that, I happen to have Rand Shaffner's book, which there's actually information in there on some of the names and how the names came about. But Avi's right, a lot of them are Cherokee names, a lot of the local families that have been here for generations. There's places named after them. So.
All right, the next question is, do the people of the Highlands like how well-known Highland beer has become, or do they wish it had not been named Highland?
You know, that I saw that question pop up and I thought, you know, that's really interesting. I have not ever been asked that question before, you know, because I am the director of Visit Highlands NC. Anything that says Highlands is okay with me. Highlands beer is not made in Highlands, though. We do have a brewery here, so if you come, make sure that you check that out. But we take no offense to it. You know, it's just one more way to get the name out there. Not a beer drinker, but I hear it's good.
Hey, it's free promotion, so I don't see why you'd mind. And our last question that we have here is, do we have any more to say on the Scots-Irish who lived in the Highlands? I think
Do you have any more to say on what?
On the Scots-Irish.
Scott others?
The
Scots-Irish
immigrants that came in.
Okay. Yes, they not so much as it did down through the Piedmont of the state. There's a lot of German stock that came into Highlands, came down by way of Pennsylvania. In my background, I'm supposedly Scotch-Irish, they said, which, but it's kind of a misnomer. You're leading, people think the Highlands games in North Carolina are conducted in Highlands, North Carolina, our Highland, and they're not. So I can't really say that Scotch-Irish have that big an influence in our community.
There were quite a few of the Scotch-Irish immigrants that came into the area, just within this whole mountainous area of North Carolina. Like Avi was saying, there's a really fabulous Scotch museum that's in a nearby town, Franklin. I think Avi mentioned that earlier. And it would give you a lot more information about that. And you can learn more about the Scotch-Irish. With a name like McHan, I'm also a part of that. So there's a few of us that landed here.
Hey, Bobby, I'll say this, the Highlands Country Club which was one of the first, which was the first to come, adopted as its logo about 30 or 40 years ago, a Highlander complete bagpiper, complete with his kilt and his knife and his high socks and his tam. And if you would look carefully at it, you might think it came right off the Dewar's Scotch bottle. In fact, we were worried about being sued at one time because that's exactly where it came from.
Oh, wow.
You didn't know that, did you, Kaye?
I did not.
Okay.
I think we're all finished for questions, so I think I'll hand it right back over to Stacy.
Thank you, Bobby. And I just want to say thank you so much to Abby and Kaye for this wonderful virtual trip to Highlands, North Carolina. What a special experience for all of us, and only serves to spur us up to Highlands as soon as possible, especially during this gorgeous autumn season. So thank you both so much. And we would also like to say a special thank you to Dr. Rand Shaffner for letting us use this wonderful video as part of tonight's program. And thank you to all those of you who joined us this evening. We hope to see you at our next History in Highballs Haunted Mordecai with the Ghost Guild, happening Thursday, October 28th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely evening. We'll see you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Stacy.